We will have 4 brief but information-packed presentations today from researchers and outdoor agencies. At the end of all of our presentations, we're going to have time for questions and group discussion, and we encourage you to ask questions and share your own expertise. Before we get started, I want to just briefly acknowledge my co-facilitator, Dr. Rachel Gilgoff. Dr. Gilgoff is a pediatrician and ACEs-aware clinical advisor, and she'll be helping moderate throughout the day today. And now, because we do have so much to cover today, I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter, Dr. Nushin Razani. Dr. Razani is a pediatrician, clinical scientist, and is founder and director of the UCSF Center for Nature and Health. Dr. Razani was also a Round 1 ACEs-aware grantee. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Razani.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me, Trish and ACEs-aware and Dr. Gilgoff. I am really excited to present today alongside outdoor agencies and folks who are really doing the work on the ground. And I just want to start by acknowledging everyone that's passed before us and where these lands come from and who they belong to. And it feels such an honor to talk about nature and to have the chance to connect with nature, especially around stress. So in 2019, as you know, the California Office of the Surgeon General and the Department of Healthcare Services launched the ACEs-aware campaign. And there was a model created where healthcare delivery would include these evidence-based stress busters. And experiencing nature was one of the stress busters, which was very exciting for all of us that were working in this field. But we kind of had to raise to meet the challenge of being part of the network of care. First of all, nature is not one thing. Nature is a collection of spaces and memories and cultural definitions, and actually a whole bunch of outdoor agencies and individuals who've devoted their time to connecting people to nature. And so part of the impetus for this work was not only the first goal, which was to really think about how to fit the evidence into a resiliency framework, but really to figure out who in California is connecting people to nature, and in which ways can those people and spaces and organizations be integrated into the ACEs network of care. And then today's presentation, I will include both of those goals, although I will really focus more on our survey findings, which talk about how to implement nature as part of the ACEs network of care. And then we will also highlight 3 case examples of organizations that are doing it well. So I know that you all need from me a really long training on the science behind ACEs and nature. And I apologize that today I'm going to spend more time on the how than the why. Part of that is because the pandemic happened. And I think for policymakers and funders, you need the why less than the how at this point. But I will have this slide to summarize some of the research on nature and health. In general, there is just a burgeoning body of evidence now talking about nature and health in general. There's always been research on nature and stress in particular, but what is new is really fitting that into a model of resiliency. And I'm actually part of a group in Europe that is many researchers trying to figure out how to create a resiliency model out of all the studies that are coming out about nature. It does seem that nature calms the autonomic nervous system, and it really promotes homeostasis. And there is work looking at the fact that time in nature reduces activity in the sympathetic nervous system. It increases activity in the parasympathetic system and influences balance in the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And that work is done in a variety of ways, including neurohormone measurement, brain imaging, and by other means. One big gap in that research is really a developmental approach and looking at people over time, especially in childhood. What's interesting and exciting is that not only is there a lot of work looking at reactivity to current stressors, so for example, what happens to cortisol levels or heart rate or other markers of stress when people are in nature or in nature compared to other settings. But there is also evidence that spending time in nature or growing up around nature can really build capacity to reduce what is considered stressful by that individual and can really build capacity to handle bigger and more stressors than one thought one was capable of dealing with. And that can include things like what you're physically capable of doing. For example, Peter Mayfield will talk about rock climbing or other ways in which your body is physically challenged. And there's also a whole bunch of evidence around the ability to withstand emotional stressors as well. Finally, there's a lot of work on how being around nature promotes your ability to exercise, sleep, eat well, and have social relationships, which are other stress busters. So that's what I'm giving on theory, and I can answer more questions afterwards. But what we did in our practice paper was a set of qualitative work and focus groups, which I will not be presenting today, but we also did us 2 surveys. And one of the surveys was of outdoor agencies, and we kind of made up that term because they don't all necessarily see themselves as doing the same thing. But we worked with some of the leaders that will be presenting today to identify who we can talk to and who we could sample around this. We did it all through email, and then after the first round came in, we also did phone calls to folks in underrepresented counties with the hope of having each county in California represented. We also sampled healthcare providers as defined by ACEs Aware. We sent out an email to the ACEs Aware listserv, and then we also made phone calls based on the list of the first set of ACEs Aware certified clinicians. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. First, I'm going to present just a little bit about the outdoor agencies that we sampled. We ended up having 200 agencies from all 50 counties respond. 40% of those who responded said that they were the executive directors, and then 30% were managers within their agencies. This little graph doesn't have a label, but it's basically how many people were served by the agency that we were talking to. And so you can see that we have quite a few that were smaller agencies, ranging all the way to some who served the whole state and had more than 500,000 people in their catchment area. So who connects people to nature in California? These are the types of organizations that we heard of. We heard from public agencies who are land managers, and that would include parks. And we also heard from water managers, school districts, health departments, people with outdoor programs that are public agencies. There are many nonprofit organizations that provide services outdoors, and they have services such as youth development, homeless programs, veterans outreach programs outdoors. There are nonprofits whose function is to support public land and to raise money for public land, or to do educational programs outside. And there are also museums and other organizations that do work outdoors. There are for-profit organizations that may work on public lands or private lands. And there are also schools that are run sometimes on public lands, such as outdoor schools. And then there were a set of respondees who were networks that share information about how to get outdoors and support people in connecting with nature. The right-hand graph is a list of the types of things that each organization listed that they do, and overwhelmingly environmental education was the most common. But I think environmental education and climate change action, we may not have in the past thought of as health interventions, but now I think we might think that they are related to health, environmental justice. And I didn't put everything in there, but the smallest group of respondees said they already had trauma healing programs. 40% of the respondees said they already have partnerships with health agencies. And of those, 40% actually already take insurance payment for their programming. And these, I don't know what that little thing is, sorry, ignore that. But this is a list of the different types of insurance that were accepted. This is we're starting to make a taxonomy of what types of programs people have. And you can see there's some that are place-based, some that are independent, guided, and then therapeutic programs, which I think you're going to hear from some of the you're going to hear from some leaders in that work today. In terms of clinicians, first of all, y'all are hard to sample, really, especially compared to the outdoor agencies, but I know you're busy. But we received 160, so thank you so much. And thank you to anybody in this list that got a call from me, from agencies representing 31 Californian counties. I forgot to mention that I didn't tell you the demographics of both respondees, which I can release later, but 79% of this group were females. 58% of them were physicians. And then we also had nurse practitioners, midwives, counselors, therapists, school therapists, social workers, and psychologists, amongst other types of respondees. It turned out, even though we targeted ACEs-aware clinics, about 45% of respondees stated that they were certified to screen. And this is the breakdown of what percent of their patients were screened for all 10 ACEs. On the bottom, you can see what respondees said that they did in response to ACEs. And my little thing is in the way for me to see the bottom. And the most common thing would be to discuss with the patient or document in the chart, and then provide evidence-based toxic stress mitigation. Nature is part of that, but this graph on the left actually shows which types of services patients were referred to in response to ACEs, if they received a referral. And by far, mental or behavioral health services were the most common. Services to meet basic needs, such as food or housing. Relationship support was the next most common. And then if you go all the way down, there were already 6 respondees that were referring to a nature-based program. I hope after today's talk, you see that some of these barriers can blur. For example, it is possible to be both a nature-based program and a mental or behavioral health service. But for the purpose of this survey, these were mutually exclusive. A sizable proportion of the clinicians said they already, sorry for the typo, had partnerships, some sort of partnership with an outdoor agency, but what they were doing with that agency was not ACEs specific. And these are the types of things that they were referring patients to. Some of them just informally recommended outdoor time, and some of them actually did a formal referral to that provider. And no one had an insurance arrangement with an outdoor agency. In general, from our respondees, we really heard that the need for trauma services actually in the outdoors is high. So people who are working in the outdoors are often on the front lines of ACEs care. And they don't necessarily call it ACEs care, but that group of respondees really talked about what's been happening since COVID. And not only an increased need for outdoor space, but other signs of trauma that they saw in the people they served, whether it was COVID-related, impacts of racism, increase in unhoused and food insecurity. There's actually articles now about more and more people are living on public lands because of housing issues. And this is a graph showing that of outdoor agencies, 88% of them said that they'd seen more trauma in the communities they've served. Likewise, the clinicians that we surveyed also reported an increase in trauma in the communities they'd served. And both groups really, sounded a loud call for collaboration and said that they were very interested in working across sector specifically to deal with ACEs and trauma. What our work did, I hope, is to highlight some of the areas where we can build capacity to work together and really bring nature into the network of care. While there was interest in working together, there are some gaps in vision and capacity. For example, 20% of the outdoor respondents said they were, very aware of what ACEs means. 21% of the healthcare respondents said that they can identify outdoor partners to work with. 50% of the outdoor agencies said that they currently have capacity to actually take referrals and follow up on them. And 18% of health respondents said, I asked some nuanced questions about, okay, you want your patients to be outdoors, but can you talk to them about the outdoors? And for example, not many people felt comfortable talking about racial discrimination outdoors and how that might make it hard for patients to get outside. And I'll do this quickly because I want folks to have time to talk, but we did try to figure out how to fill those gaps. Oops. So what clinicians are really looking for their patients, which is interesting, is each of these squares is proportional to how many people said they wanted it. Clinicians really want the people they serve to have help to get outdoors and to get through barriers to getting outdoors. They want services that are culturally humble and really see patients for who they are and where they're at, and to give support in getting outside. And they talked about childhood development and developmentally based programming. And I think what's relationship-centered approach in programs. And what's interesting is the smallest category is just visiting a location. You can't see the rest of this, but this would be my patient would be fine just visiting a location with no programming. And so I think most clinicians were really interested in some value add to that partnership with an agency. What they really would need to get their clients outdoors, a family navigator or someone to really do case management around helping families go outdoors. There was interest in waiting room materials instead of just during the clinician interaction, but other places where the outdoors could be promoted. And then a smaller group, which was very interesting, wanted to know how they could conduct healing themselves outdoors. Why would an outdoor agency want to do this? This was very heartwarming to me, that the outdoor agencies are also deeply invested in community health. And I think that is part of the mission for many organizations, that even improving health outcomes is of value to the outdoor agencies. But overwhelmingly, outdoor agencies need more people and more types of people to care about the outdoors and to be in the outdoors and to vote for the outdoors. Outdoor agencies need to know how to do this. They wanted training, funding, staff, and lots of capacity building, including more diversity amongst their staff. Currently, some parks have a law enforcement model for responding to crises, and some people mentioned that that needs to change. So, oops. With that background, I think this is like an unbelievable period of time where we have two important parts of a community or a child's network of care really wanting to come together. And it's really an opportunity for partnership in creating community-based safety nets outside of the clinic. And nature really should be part of the ACEs network of care, almost the medical backyard, and part of what you can prescribe for trauma. we decided on some like really defining things that make programs special. And that's the type of people you're about to hear from. We have 3 providers who have relationship-based programs that have long-term investments in folks and are authentic and by, for, and of the people served. They happen to represent, they cover from Southern to Northern California, and I'm really proud to introduce them. We are asking to keep questions until the end. I hope I didn't take up too much time. But the first person that I'm going to introduce is Monica Valdez. She is, I'm so sorry for that delay. She's ACSW, and she has worked for years with families and individuals to help them turn life around. She is currently the wellness coordinator at the Dolores Huerta Foundation in Fresno County. And she has a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, and she went to UC Bakersfield to obtain her master's in social work. And she began her work in Dolores Huerta as an intern in the Youth Civic Engagement Initiative program. She led healing circles, has done one-on-one counseling, provided resources, collaborated work with youth, and taught coping skills. She participates in cultural activities, civic engagement, and wellness retreats. And she has been, through these wellness retreats, has found herself called to her purpose, and her heart was stirred to stand in solidarity with all constituents of her program for youth and families. She's committed to advocacy for social justice, freedom, and equitable opportunities, and is committed to treatment of youth in peace, justice, freedom, cultural respect, and holistic wellness. Peter Mayfield is here from Gateway Mountain Center. He is a longstanding advocate for a close connection to nature as a key to health, and he's committed to changing the system of mental health care, especially for youth suffering from serious emotional disturbance and complex trauma. He's currently the executive director and founder of the Gateway Mountain Center, a nonprofit organization in Truckee, California, which is at the forefront of delivering innovative nature-based methods to support young people in their capacity to learn, heal, and thrive. Over the course of his 40-year career as a leading entrepreneur in the field of embodied peak experience and a world-class climber, Peter has guided thousands of people through transformative adventures in nature and mountain environments. He previously served as the chief guide of the Yosemite Mountaineering School and is the founder of City Rock, one of the world's first full-service climbing gyms. And he's also just an amazing leader in this field that has done much of the foundational work that we all base what we do on. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you so much, Dr. Razani. I met Nusheen at a conference, and she was speaking on a panel, and she said, someday you might be able to get a copay for hiking boots. And someday there will be a Medi-Cal code for this. And I was kind of jumping up and down in my seat because we were about a month away from getting certified as a Medi-Cal provider. Over the last 10 years, we have built a system and a program that we think could be a really useful model or example of a way to bring treatment out of the clinics and right to where the kids are. And when we think about this, if ACEs Aware is successful and most pediatricians start screening, we could end up identifying like 1.6 million youth who have a score of 4 or more, which would be mandatory referral to services. And there will never be enough licensed clinicians to meet that need. So 11 years ago, we were operating wellness and adventure programming in our alternative education system. So the continuation high school and the community schools, which is a new name for what they used to call court schools. And the Mental Health Service Act in California had a big emphasis on innovations. So we proposed and applied for innovation funding to start our program, which we call Whole Hearts, Minds, and Bodies, Nature-Based Therapeutic Mentoring. we did this because we were observing directly how difficult it was for these high-need youth to access behavioral health care. In many rural counties, as in ours, behavioral health is co-located with law enforcement. So for a high-need youth on Medi-Cal to go see a therapist, they go to the same building as the court, child protective services, probation. They have to wander through those floors to a wonderful therapist on the third floor in a windowless room. We set up a program where licensed clinicians could supervise well-trained, well-paid paraprofessionals who could spend 2 or 3 hours one-on-one with these youth, mostly outdoors, pick them up from school, drive out. Sometimes we kayak, sometimes we walk. If it's pouring rain, we sit in a cafe and do artwork and journaling. We spend this time, we feed them, and we bring them home, and we connect with their families. We're like in the living room, sharing the stories of how well the youth did that day. So our delivery system today, we have 7 licensed therapists who clinically supervise 24 well-trained therapeutic mentors. And our caseload today is 55 youth who get seen one-on-one each week. We went in 18 months from a funded innovative experiment to a full service contract with our county. And then 2 years later, we were certified as a Medi-Cal provider, which was not easy. Because of this approach, taking youth out of the clinics and into the woods, we're showing some really interesting results. Over half of our caseload are youth from Latinx families. 91% of these kids are still doing weekly sessions after 6 months, which is our retention rate. 69% after a year. This is these are really impressive results. Our treatment method we call 4 roots for growing a human. Root number 1 is authentic relationship. Number 2, connecting to nature. Number 3, embodied peak experience. And number 4, helping others, connecting to community through service. We feel that the 2 to 3 hour sessions that we get to have with these youth, and we say that our treatment is shoulder to shoulder, sharing experience, as opposed to like on the couch, eye to eye. And for a lot of these adolescents, this is really effective. I want to emphasize that our service is reserved for youth who are classified in the Medi-Cal system as severe or moderate severe. So the level of like wraparound, and we are partners in wraparound in our 2 counties. This consistent caring relationship with a non-parental adult is the most important thing. And so for us, nature is the context for that therapeutic bond to grow. We are connecting our work deeply to the Child Trauma Academy in Houston, run by Dr. Bruce Perry, and the Trauma Research Foundation in Boston, run by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. Nature, the topic of this whole webinar, of course, has huge health benefits. For us, it's the present moment experience of the sensorial impact, like the patterns, the sights, the smells, the movement of leaves. And so for us, engaging in nature is a mindfulness activity. And we know that that's really powerful. And we connect to the like attention restoration theory and some of these other things. It's also a connection to the life force. We're always looking for those moments of awe, finding the toad eggs in the edge of the pond, or the insects, or the budding flowers. Embodied peak experience is a more immersive and physical engagement. So a lot of the youth we work with are not athletic at all. It's rare that they would do this rappel. A lot of them have been on antipsychotic medications for years. There's a lot of obesity in our caseload. But we say we look for the climbing on flat ground. We're finding that log across the creek, the rock pile, kayaking on a windy day on the lake, snowshoeing, anything that's kind of rough ground that activates the vestibular, the proprioceptive, the sensory motor, basically, the cerebellum and the brainstem. There is some really interesting neuroscience that supports the efficacy of this. We connect to the work of Dr. Ruth Lanius up in Western Ontario University and her team. They have done hundreds of brain scans on adults who had early childhood trauma, and they see signature weak connectivity in parts of the default mode network. And there's a growing hypothesis that repeated, well-supported activation of those neural pathways can strengthen these weak connections. And indeed, we see that kids we start with might have this like slumped kind of beat down posture. They're not connected to their bodies. After these weekly sessions, literally they go from slump to looking up and out and engaging the world. And that correlates with a lot of behavioral change. Helping youth find meaning and connecting to community through service. Sometimes it's at restoration projects in nature. Sometimes it's just volunteering at the food bank. This is also a key pathway in our method. We do the YOQSR assessment. The county does the CAN survey as well, but for us, the YOQSR is accessible, and we're showing significant reductions of symptomatic distress, 45% intrapersonal or emotional distress, 45% reduction in interpersonal relational distress, improvements in somatic reduction in somatic distress, and critical incidents. So many of the youth we work with have had, expulsion from school, psychiatric, 5150 psychiatric crises in a hospital, incarceration. And so we see this go down. This has big implications on our system of care. In terms of county behavioral health contracts and Medi-Cal, and the whole everything, case management, clinical supervision, we spend about $10,000 a year to treat a youth effectively in weekly sessions. But compare this to 300,000, over 300 for incarceration, or the national average of a visit to a hospital for a psychiatric crisis, which I'm sure in California is higher than 15,000. This is money well spent. Our community really is supporting us because they notice the impacts that ripple throughout. So our hospital district contracts us because they see that if they refer a youth after a 5150, a psychiatric crisis, they're much less likely to have a repeat event. The probation department refers kids because kids in our program are successful in probation. And this has many ripple effects. We think this is an example worth spreading, and we are hard to bring this program from the eastern part of California to the Bay Area. We're currently working with UCSF in the hopes of doing some research projects. We think this would work wonderful in Bakersfield as well. And thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was super inspirational, really.
Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm so grateful. My name is Monica Valdez. I'm from the Dolores Huerta Foundation. My work is primarily with the youth and their families in our youth program. Dolores Huerta has been around for some time, but specifically, I'm going to discuss, she has a 501c3 nonprofit foundation. And specifically, I'm going to speak regarding the youth. So Dolores Huerta Foundation, the youth program, the youth actually cultivated and developed their own youth program and named it. It's Liberated Youth for Empowerment. We refer to as LIFE. It offers young people opportunities through a critical lens of history and systems inequity. Our program has 3 different pathways. We have civic engagement, transformative arts, new media, and technology. We have an intensive leadership program. And through these approaches, we incorporate an entire, I'll call it a blanket. It's all encompassed with wellness. We believe with the LIFE program that every young person has potential to be an activist and also has the skills and ability to be a leader in their communities and beyond. So we're here looking at the 3 different pathways, but specifically, I want to touch on nature and wellness, of course. Through nature and wellness in the outdoors, it's really incorporated in transformative arts with our youth and promoted the holistic wellness. The youth are taught how to practice self-care and increase wellness being outside. They weren't used to being outside in the beginning. Pre-pandemic, we incorporated this, but really intensified it through this time of the pandemic in the last 2 years. The youth are taught practical, everyday ways to engage in the outdoors for their wellness. They are taught mindfulness practices to find peace and balance. They engage using their sensory motor skills, identifying the different senses when there are feelings of stress or anxiety approaches. We practice this in every space. We have wellness Fridays, every Friday, and we teach these different components to cope and just to enjoy themselves in life. We believe that they have all the strengths that they need, and we really want to cultivate and bring those strengths and gifts out. So specifically to how we use nature in our work, we use nature to decrease barriers, and we like to take them on big trips when we're able to, of course, bring it into everyday life, just so they know it's at their fingertips. If they're stressed or they have uncomfortable or negative feelings, we use it as an everyday practice. The outdoor education trips specifically that have been taken with the youth, I'm going to talk about one of our youth and what it did for Danny. For Danny, he was 14 years old at the time that we came in contact with him at one of our outreach areas within the community. He grew up with two siblings and his mother that had migrated from Mexico. They were facing many hardships and challenges. So through an outreach event, we met Danny. He was shy, withdrawn, relatively low self-esteem. He struggled with his weight, and also at times in school had verbal altercations. He did not know at the time how to speak up for himself and self-advocate. This particular individual, Danny, hadn't been exposed to many outdoor activities or traveled to do anything outdoors with his family or friends. Danny started the youth program and he started participating in different events, small and everyday events during the weekend, to include tree planting, sometimes food distribution to get out in the community, graffiti removal. And also specifically one of the retreats that Danny went on was to the state of Washington. And he went with several other youth to the Native American Museum. And this was funded through the Youth and Family Civic Engagement Initiative through the state, in which, of course, Dolores Huerta had been given this grant. I believe it was 2019. And we will be finishing the funding of this grant this year. Currently, we also have another grant that was given to us 2021, and it is, it is the Elevated Youth California Grant. And so these two grants are what sustains the youth program. So the youth went to the 6-day Washington State trip. He also engaged and participated in different outdoor activities on the indigenous people's lands. He was exposed to storytelling, cooking, crafting. He learned to participate and understand healing circles. And these healing circles were facilitated in the outdoors. He also went to Yosemite, where he participated in hiking and camping, bike riding, nature walks, fishing and water activities. Currently, the Youth Empowerment Program is trying to incorporate these activities, even though it's rather restricted at this time, and we are opening up again, right, in our state. But we really want to begin the different ideas of being outside again. So we'll do this even via Zoom, going outside, and then we do pre and post surveys to see how well it was incorporated in their day and how their mood was elevated. So ultimately, Danny found his voice. This is the big reason why we do what we do. He found his voice. He found that he was worthy. He was important. He was cared about. He deserved to be loved, love himself and others to respect him and care for him. And that's the essence, and that's the purpose and the passion behind why we do what we do with the youth. We can't wait to come back, Mr. Peter Mayfield. I have discussed it with administration, and we are so excited to partner with you again. Youth had an amazing time. But this exposure with the outdoors was really transformative for Danny. And he did better in school. He's speaking up for himself. And he really is enjoying his life. And I attribute a lot of his growth and transformation to finding himself and really healing and connecting with nature. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Monica. I realize like it's so amazing to have each of you, but each of you there's so much to say. So it's hard for me, but I have to move on to the next speaker. So we have time for questions afterwards, but thank you really, and thank you for your work. Next, really excitedly, we have Lexis Morrow from Outdoor Outreach in San Diego. Lexis is currently the developmental coordinator at Outdoor Outreach and has been working in the nonprofit sector for 3 years. But their start with Outdoor Outreach was much earlier as a former participant. And as a former participant, they understand the deeply impactful nature of what the outdoor represents and the change that it inspired in their lives and the lives of those around them. Now working for Outdoor Outreach, Lexis's goal is to make that a reality for every youth and family that goes through this program and to create a positive ripple effect in their community. Lexis, welcome.
Thank you. I am really excited to be here, and I'm excited to be able to present to you guys, y'all, sorry. To start off, I work with Outdoor Outreach, and if you don't know who that is, that's okay. We're pretty small. We are a San Diego-based nonprofit. We work with all around San Diego County, and we work primarily with youth between the ages of 11 and 25. Usually from under-resourced and underrepresented communities here in San Diego. And our goal and our mission is to connect them to the transformative powers of the outdoors through continuous outdoor engagement. Some of the things that we do to make sure that that happens and to make sure that we are building a community that is trauma and building a community that is informed and welcome to all is to make sure that we have certain things in place for the youth that we work with. So some of the examples are participation by choice, which is that we meet the youth where they're at and that they have the opportunity or to join the activity or to not join the activity, and that is highly encouraged with the youth that are around us, and whatever they choose to do and how far they go is their success for that day or for that week or for however long they are with their trips. We've had kids who we go on rock climbing and never get on the wall, and some of the kids there, their favorite part is talking with the other students or talking with the instructors and not rock climbing. We also do things like welcoming and closing circles, asking the youth about their day. We also go over the day's agenda so that the students understand what they're going to be doing. They're encouraged to have their own input and change the flow of the day or the activity of the day, regardless of, you know, if there's any planning that went into it, so that they have the structure and the fairness of and the choice of what they're going to be doing. We also have positive and amazing peer relationships and staff relationships with the youth. We try to encourage authenticity in the youth that we work with and in the staff that work with them, as well as no put downs, only put ups. So making sure that they are coming in with a positive experience, because we know that it's not necessarily the activity that you're doing that creates that impact. It's the people that you surround yourself with in those activities. We also do a lot of restorative justice circles when it comes to understanding participant behavior and making sure that the youth that aren't being shown that they're being put down or restrictions placed on them based off their behavior, but to truly understand what they're going through and how to use that understanding to better create a program for them. And so an example of this is in March of 2019, we partnered with Rady Children's Hospital. I was the coordinator that started the development of this, and our whole goal was to reach out and to develop a program with their mental health and their medical health services to use outdoors as a therapeutic engagement. And since its inception, we've had 5 cohorts, 4 medical cohorts and 4 mental health cohorts and 1 medical health cohort. Each cohort usually has a max of 12 students. And in addition to that, we have 1 to 2 social workers that can be there to help support the staff and the youth if anything should arise. And some of the bigger and important components when building out this this program was to make sure that the participants that were being referred to us were the ones that would get the most out of what we were doing. We also emphasized a student contract, which is basically the students come up what their community goals are, what they want to see in the community that they're surrounding themselves with, what was not supposed to happen in their community and what things were supposed to happen. And then, of course, we used activity influence lesson plans, which I will go over a little bit more in the next slide. We used debriefs and discussions where we would talk to the youth and, see how they felt about the day. And then that would influence how we went about the next one. Again, like I said, we did challenge by choice and emotional safeties every time we went out on a trip. And we were very consistent with our staffing because we know that the engagement of mentors and the staff that we work with consistently helps build those relationships with the youth that we work with. And obviously we were ready for any type of emotional fallout. And so we've had trauma-informed training with our staff and mandate reporting and everything like that, so that we understood what we were going through when we came into this program. We also put together, and with the help of the youth, when creating this program, tried to emphasize certain things that were related to the activity. So starting off with basics of trust and building out team building and programs that would allow the youth to connect with our staff and with each other. Resilience, because we all know that at least one time you're going to fall off the bike, and to build that resilience of getting back up again, using the activities that we have as an example of the things that they could do, instead of being told like they had most of their lives of the things that they couldn't. And we also use multiple discussion prompts and debriefs of what we were trying to get out of the week or the lesson of the day. So for leadership of the week of hiking, we asked them what type of leaders they preferred and what type of leaders they see themselves as, and what type of leaders do they want to see themselves as. The same with rock climbing and how they could face those challenges that they faced in rock climbing that they could use in everyday life. And some of those examples is really kind of showing just how deeply impactful this program is. One of the youth said that when climbing, he could apply it to his everyday life because he knew that they can take the experience it and apply it to life by thinking things through and going through slowly, and eventually you'll make it. Or when climbing and looking down, it was really scary, and climbing was difficult, just like school. Both are difficult, long and scary, but just like rock climbing, I can get through it and I can make it to the top. Those are just a few examples of the youth that we work with, or in the programs that we work with. We work with probation, juvenile justice centers, homeless youth. So Radies is definitely one of the small part of what outdoor outreach works with, but we know that with all the youth that we work with, that they are being deeply impacted by the outdoor experiences and the mentors that they get to work with, mainly because at least 75% of the staff that we work with currently that works with Outdoor Outreach are former youth participants. And so we see a full revolving effect in a cycle, a positive cycle of this outdoor relationship.
Lexus, thank you so much. Thank you everyone who's been participating. I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Gilgoff in case there were any questions so far.
Just a really, really, really big thank you to all the speakers. This is such great and helpful information. And I agree with you, Nusheen, the how is so important and so needed. So I would like to just open it up. We had one question, and I think it's a quick question for you, Nusheen. What was the percentage of outdoor agencies that already had trauma healing programs?
So I think I wouldn't use this as like a definitive, because the way it was they would mark all the different types of things that they had. And it was the lowest number. I can't remember right now. I think it was like less than 20%. But as you see through what Lexus said and what Monica said and Peter, there are some agencies that are trauma informed throughout. I would say, and I would like to ask Peter and others to answer this. I think that might be a minority, and it's definitely an area of growth for where people who are in the ACEs Aware Network could offer trainings to outdoor agencies that are near them, because there is a thirst, and they are on the front lines of trauma every day. Does anyone else have a way to answer that? But in terms of like direct therapeutic nature programs, I will find that number for you while someone else answers.
Yeah, I think it is probably going to be rapidly growing, but it is, I mean, in the circles of like environmental education organizations, there is definitely a lot of discussion in it. Luckily, it's coming on the heels of the California Department of Ed has put out a lot of emphasis on social emotional learning, SEL. So adding trauma informed on top of that, I think makes sense. So I think it is growing, but I think it is still a pretty small amount of organizations that could, tomorrow take a referral, and that's what we're hoping, that all this effort grows.
I mean, in many ways, this is what people do in the outdoors. They do transform. That's what they do, is transformative experiences. They know that process with the youth, but not everybody has long-term programming that is relationship based. That's something that we can advocate for during partnerships, is what does it really take to heal ACEs? That in what ways does your organization need help to build that capacity?
Thank you. We have 1 minute left, and I see Elisa's hand is up. I don't know, Elisa, if you have a really quick question, or Trish, if you feel like we need to wrap it up. I don't know how you guys feel.
Go ahead, Dr. Nicholas.
Hi, I think, in Long Beach, we've worked for years with the YMCA, and we also we went through our trauma-informed organization transition in 2013 and trained their staff in the trauma-informed approach. But, I don't know if they came across as one of the groups have a youth institute. So I think nature has certainly always been a focus, and we've always encouraged our families to go into nature, and we have some very nice parks, but we also have some very dangerous parks. So I think there is nature around many of our families that are struggling economically and have challenges, but many times it's not safe for them to go into their parks. So some of our very early community health programming that we've done through the last 25 years was really trying to make those parks safer, because sometimes there is nature, but they can't go there because it's not safe. But also training those that have been doing youth empowerment in the trauma-informed approach, and now they're teaching mental health first aid to their staff and to people in the community, which is great. The other is really taking a look at the intergenerational opportunities, because so many of the parents of the children had a lot of trauma and challenges in their life. So we're also working on that in our Mental Health Services Act funding. Peter, thank you to mention that, because that's what we've done with ours, and that's a whole other story. But anyway, great job and so good to be talking about this. Thank you.
I think that I would encourage people who do have networks to approach outdoor agencies in there, and we can be of help in connecting you, but to co-write grants together. So really that really accounting for the capacity of that outdoor agency and what they would need to meet you. As you saw, they don't necessarily have it already, but they are run by people that are often very trauma informed just by nature of what they do every day.
Yeah,
And I
so
think they are great partners for moving this this network of care forward.
and give us your contact so we can reach
Yes,
out.
I think all four of us, I don't want to speak for everyone else, but maybe we can all put our emails in the chat and we'd all be happy to.
Great, thank you.
When we did our survey, we asked outdoor providers if they would be willing to be part of like a guide or a resource, which we'll be putting out of people that are interested in partnership or organizations. Oh, and this is my email.
One thing I think is interesting when I saw in all the presentations, in the context of shared experience in nature with youth, there, in a sense, I think a lot of us are able to help these youth with all the spokes on the Stress Busters wheel. You know, if you're out rock climbing in San Diego on a cliff, you can also be connecting to the youth about how they're sleeping, their diet, the other relationships in their life. So I think that's an important piece here, is that sure, nature is a separate spoke, but the shared experience kind of gets you in the trust that's built and the quality of the relationship. I think it helps these youth access every piece of the healing journey.
Thank you so much to all our speakers. And I hope, you know, what I get out of this is that it's possible that we're doing the great work across the state, and that, you know, we really can incorporate nature into our work across all our different organizations. So happy to continue this conversation, and I will turn it over to Trish. I think we have another learning network call coming up in a bit.
I invite Emily to chime in if that's correct, but just again, want to thank all of our speakers and all the participants for this really great call today.
We are working on scheduling more, and we will send out the invitations to future Learning Network calls and future Stress Buster events.
Great. Well, I think that concludes our session today. Thank you all again, and look for the materials from today's session in the coming week or so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.